Welcome to the Warchant TV Sunday Breakdown Show. It's actually late Saturday, but we're filming the show here live from Memorial Stadium, also known as Death Valley. Florida State just suffered the 35-30 loss to Clemson. Of course, usually we're Tomahawk Grill, our sponsor of the show, but road games, it's kind of hard to be there on Sunday mornings, but a lot of times we'll be there for that. But yeah, we're going to break down the show for you today, or break down the game for you today. And to talk about it, Clint Trickett, very good outing for him, 24-38 for 336-yard passing, 3 TDs. You go in thinking that, you think Florida State probably would have won the game. Other side of the ball, not so good. We're going to break that down. The defense had some struggles. A lot of injured players in this game. Obviously, Clint Trickett got his first start. But, DC, let's start with the Florida State offense. Passing attack. I mean, like I said, he threw for over 300 yards. Clint Trickett completed 2/3 of his passes, 3 touchdowns, only 1 pick. I mean, all things considered, I mean, that's a fantastic start for this young man.
Yeah, I mean, and the crazy thing about it is, I mean, if you would have told anybody that Clint Trickett was going to come in and complete 24 of 38, I believe it was, 336 yards, 3 touchdowns, you'd have said it's going to be a walk in the park. Florida State's going to win this game. But as we'll talk about a little bit later, certainly the mistakes, especially on defense, third downs, that sort of thing really is what doomed them. But, I mean, yeah, what else could you have asked for from Clint Trickett to put up those types of numbers in this type of environment, made big throws, a couple fantastic throws. I mean, Rodney Smith on that first long touchdown, the 56-yarder, I mean, you couldn't have put that on the money any better. So, that's a very positive thing moving forward. Not only, hey, what if E.J. Manuel isn't ready? Maybe the shoulder takes a little bit longer. Certainly you have confidence in this guy. And not only that, moving forward next year, the year after, maybe you've got a pretty, guy that's set right there that you feel pretty good about, whether he ends up being the starter or ends up being a backup.
Yeah, really the passing game. A lot of receivers came through. A lot of the young guys. Rashad Green, 8 catches for 98 yards, had a touchdown. He looked fantastic. I mean, we saw our first real action of Christian Green getting out a lot. He had 7 catches for 77 yards. You mentioned Rodney Smith, 4 catches for 118. That's a pretty good average per catch right there. Yeah. And you got to give some props, I think, also to the offensive line for the pass protection. He was sacked only twice, Clint Trickett, and they knew he had to pass for most of the game, so I thought they did a really good job. Run blocking, not so much. We'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, with the loss, failed to mention, Florida State falls to 2-2 in the season, 0-1 in the ACC, and that's the big one right there because you lost to Clemson. We may talk about that a little bit later, but that's your Atlantic Division rivals. You're basically down 2 now to them. You really have to run the table and hope they lose twice. We'll talk about that. So the passing, we're starting with a positive, DC. There's not a whole lot of positive after that. The other side of the coin on offense is the running game. And the stats aren't real pretty there. Have they been all season? 15 rushes for 29 yards. That's 1.9 yards per rush. And I know a couple sacks worked up, but even throw those out, you're still in the 2.5 range type of that. I mean, it's not pretty.
Yeah, absolutely. And I asked Jimbo after the thing, I mean, how much of a concern is it? I mean, you really throughout the whole first month of the season, maybe they didn't try to run the ball. Teams are stacking the box. You played Oklahoma. Well, at some point, you get 4 games, you get a month into the season, and they've shown 0 success to run the football. You got to start wondering really what's going on. Is it an offensive line issue? Is it a running backs issue? Surprised to not see Jermaine Thomas out there. Again. Surprised to not that maybe you try giving him a run, try to change it up. Of course, we did see some Wildcat. That's something that's new and had a little bit of success with it. Obviously, the numbers don't indicate, but Chris Thompson was back there. They stuffed it a couple times, but had a couple nice gains. But, I mean, other than that, like you said, you got to really be concerned about where this running game is moving forward.
And that was really on the first series where the Wildcat had some success, but after that really didn't do a whole lot. And kind of odd, how odd the way Jimbo ran. Didn't really run with any misdirection or any guys going behind him like kind of the classic Wildcat, just basically a guy sitting back there and just running the ball. Not a little weird how they did. But anyway, running game definitely an issue. So offensively, all in all, though, they put up, obviously one of the defensive scores, but I think if you knew what you were going to get out of the offense, I think you would think this would have been a win for Florida State. And when we come back, we want to talk about the other side of the ball where it got kind of ugly for Mark Stoops' troops. They didn't do real well here in Clemson, South Carolina. We'll be back talking about that. Welcome back to the Warchant TV Sunday Breakdown Show, sponsored by Tomahawk Sports Bar and Grill on West Tennessee Street. We are here in Death Valley, going through Florida State's 35-30 loss, which drops them to 2-2, 0-1 in the ACC. Tough loss for Florida State, and really the big surprise, I think, more than anything, is the defense. And you got to give some credit, obviously, to Clemson. You saw what they did against Auburn. A lot of people thought that Auburn's got such a horrible defense. That was an aberration. I guess a little bit you got to give them credit. On the other side, maybe Florida State's defense, especially that secondary, I think they did pretty well against the rush when you look at the numbers. But, man, the secondary, they just got torched. Total 455 yards. Clemson racked up in the game over 300 yards. What really struck me as one of the stats I looked at were the play numbers. 86 plays for Clemson, 53 for Florida State.
Yeah, I think it's sort of 2 tiers. I think one is, like you said, hey, Clemson proved that maybe, you wondered what they had coming in, again, against a bad Auburn defense. Their other games were Troy and Wofford. You didn't really know. They'd put up at least 35 in all three of those games, so you didn't know if it was a paper tiger type of thing. But, hey, certainly on one hand, they proved that, this is a pretty solid defense they just went up against. And, look at some of those big plays that they had. Like you said, they're running 86 plays. Certainly they had their way on a lot of things. Now, just equal to that is, like you said, the miscues are countless. You talk about 11 penalties for 124 yards for Florida State's defense. You talk about they had 5 penalties on 3rd and 4th downs that gave Clemson first downs. 3 of those led to touchdown drive. They took advantage of those penalties on 3 of those 5, and they went right in for touchdowns. So, if those don't happen, that's literally like putting points on the board that wouldn't have been there. So, certainly you look at both those things. Not only did Clemson play pretty well, you do have to give them credit, but on the other hand, obviously Florida State shot themselves in the foot in so many different ways. 3rd down defense, they allowed 9 of 17 on 3rd down. And the penalties, the untimeliness of those penalties certainly played just as big a factor.
Well, that's huge, and I know Jimbo Fisher brought that up in the post-game press conference. The 3rd down, allowing them to go, and that allowed them to get the 36 plays. That allowed them to have, I think, a lot more, almost 10 more minutes in time of possession, because you kept giving up. A lot of those 3rd downs were 3rd and long. A couple of we had the same situation here in the 4th quarter where they had the 3rd and 12 or whatever it was. It was very shockingly similar. They went right down the middle to the play against Oklahoma the week before. They were able to come up with those plays, and I don't know what it is, but it's something that Mark Stoops has to get fixed.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's funny. From an entertainment value, it was a wild game. A lot of crazy plays. Obviously, on the bright side for defensively, Werner makes a fantastic play on that, and they were able to get some pressure, and they were able to create some negative plays. It's not as if they just got the FSU defense just got torched, but again, it's mistakes that are compounded tenfold by when you make those mistakes. Pass interference calls. 3rd and 14. There's a pass interference down there that, it's just
look catchable.
Exactly, and so it's one of those things. Even when they think they had them in a corner, they finally were turning the corner to stop Clemson. There comes a penalty. There comes a roughing the kicker. Whatever the case may be. So yeah, obviously a rough performance, not just in the fact of how many yards they allowed, but in just all those mistakes.
And that's obviously another thing, and I was surprised when I asked Bjorn Warner about this, and he just said, how are they so successful? He said a lot of misdirection. We were just caught off guard, and that's a sign of an undisciplined team when you get caught on misdirection going back and forth. And that's something I thought this defense was experienced enough that they wouldn't do. Now on the other side, you could say they haven't played a team really that does it like Clemson does. Right. So, it's an adjustment thing. That took them a little while to do that, but they kept doing it the whole game and had a lot of success. So anyway, back to the drawing board. Obviously, this bye week comes at a perfect time for FSU now to kind of regroup. And, Jimbo said we got to find ourselves. We got to figure out what kind of team we're going to be. And that's what I want to talk to you about, a little big picture thing here. Now they're sitting here. A week ago they were top 5. They were playing the number 1 team in the country, ESPN game there. Everyone's on cloud 9. All of a sudden now they've lost 2 in a row. They had a ton of injuries. The real question marks. They have no running game. The defense that we thought was the stable of this team is now there's some question marks about that as well. So, where do you go from here?
Yeah, what's happened is reality's hit them square between the eyes at this point. You're talking about a 2-2 team that now to ensure a chance of getting even into the ACC championship game, will have to run the table in the conference. Now, that's probably fairly easy this year. Florida State has a great draw. The next 5 games that they play in the league are Wake Forest, Duke, NC State, Maryland, and Boston College. Those are all games that they'll be favored home or road by over a touchdown, and at least a touchdown, probably double digits in most of those games. So certainly they've got a chance, like you said, with the bye week to be able to get back, try to correct some of those mistakes, and they've got some easy targets. Clemson, though, on the other hand, now who is now a game and a half ahead of Florida State in the ACC standings, they got to go to Virginia Tech next week. They still have to go to Georgia Tech, who's looking like a big surprise in the league. And actually, even in the division, they've got to go to Maryland, go to NC State. So even some of the division games, in terms of who you play on the road, is a little more difficult. So while, yes, those national championship hopes, all that excitement, expectations certainly dashed now on a 2-game losing streak. Obviously, confidence isn't very high right now, but here's a chance to regroup. And certainly the season, as Jimbo said in the postgame, this season's not over. They can still be a very good football team, and there's really no reason that they couldn't run it the rest of the way, get into a BCS bowl game. I mean, that's all still on the table, despite how they've looked the last couple weeks.
Did you really say tough games, Maryland and NC State, how they're playing? What happened to Maryland on Saturday?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Hey, it's all relative with the ACC, right?
No, but I think the one thing, Florida State fans, it's a bye week for Florida State, so you better be watching that Virginia Tech, Clemson game. Right. Florida State fans need to be Hokie fans if they want this team to have any chance. In my opinion, if Clemson's able to win that game, first of all, impressive as heck to beat Auburn, Florida State, Virginia Tech back-to-back. You got to say they're for real.
Right.
And I've been very critical of Dabo Swinney. I'd have to tip my hat to the guy and say, if you can pull that one off, you got something going on there. But, I mean, if they win that game, it's really going to take something special for Florida State to back into at that point. So I think you lose that, really, maybe your whole season's almost down the drain and if they pull off the upset and beat the Hokies in Blacksburg.
Yeah, but it's one of those things. I think it's been 6 years since they've gone to the divisional format. Clemson has lost at least 3 conference games 5 of those 6 years. And the one other time that they made it, they still lost 2 games. So, I mean, it's pretty tough. And again, the only reason I even think Florida State has a chance to go 7-1 is because of how easy their schedule is. Right. I mean, it's hard to predict a team only losing 1 conference game or running the table. So I would imagine there'll be a small window, but the margin for error is gone. I mean, that left tonight, with this 35-30 loss in the division. The margin for error is gone. FSU is going to ensure themselves any chance of playing. They'll have to run the table and get a little bit of help, like you said.
Well, I guess the good news, in addition to kind of mentally being able to regroup, I mean, they're going to have so many guys who are out injured. We assume, from what we hear, E.J. Manuel assumes going to be back, even if he has to miss the Wake Forest game. I mean, at the time the heart of that schedule kicks in again, we expect him to be fine. The 2 Reeds, Greg Reed, who was a little bit of a surprise. He was dressed out, he warmed up, but I never saw him see the field. Burt Reed did not. We were hopeful he might be able to come out. Didn't come out. No, Kenny Shaw, we saw come out and he did pretty well there. And so a little bit, but I mean, this team's going to get much healthier. So I mean, you'll have a full, 100% Florida State going into this important stretch.
Yeah, well, there's some other concerns though. I mean, it seems to be getting worse on the injury front. We'll check later in the week, of course. Check Warchant.com. We'll update all the injury stuff. But Brandon Jenkins left the game with an ankle issue. He didn't return, and then David Spurlock left. He was out for the game. So I mean, hey, if there's one unit on this team that can't afford any injuries, it's that offensive line, and they haven't even played well with the starting 5 in there. So, those could be 2 huge injuries if they're serious at all. But we'll check on that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, for the most part, what you got from Shaw, what an amazing turnaround, really, from him. And so, maybe you get Burt Reed back with 2 more weeks. You would assume he'll be back here in a couple of weeks. So maybe, like you said, with this bye week, you get a fresh start, and you go at Wake Forest on October 8th, and maybe things can start turning around.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for us here at the Warchant TV Sunday Breakdown Show from Death Valley. We appreciate you tuning in. And you can, remember, stop by Tomahawk Sports Bar and Grill on West Tennessee Street. You can see us there. Probably we won't be here next week for the bye week, but the Wake game, hopefully we'll be able to film a show there with myself and managing editor D.C. Reeves. So thanks for tuning in. Continue to check out warchant.com, folks. And if you're not a member, 7-day free trial. Good night, folks.